From The Times and The Sunday Times, this is The Story. I'm Luke Jones.
And the Oscar goes to No Other Land.
In March this year, a team of Palestinian and Israeli filmmakers appeared on stage in Hollywood and together accepted the Best Documentary Award. Their film is a glimpse into the realities of life in the West Bank, the most populous of the Palestinian Territories.
Thank you to the Academy for the award. It's such a big honor for the four of us and everybody supporting.
Before the month was out, though, one of the people on that stage, co-director Hamdan Ballal, would return home to the West Bank and be attacked and detained by Israeli settlers and soldiers.
They was, laughing about me. The Oscar, they can't protect you.
Times reporter Venetia Menzies went to meet co-director Hamdan Ballal and Basel Adra, who stars in the award-winning documentary, to find out what life is like now for Palestinians in the West Bank. The story today, life on the other front line. We can start with the easiest question, Venetia. Introduce yourself, both your names and who you are.
I'm Venetia Menzies, and I'm the assistant data editor of The Times and Sunday Times.
Before we start, can you explain what the West Bank is, where we're talking about, and why it's so interesting, I guess?
So the West Bank is quite literally the West Bank of the River Jordan. It's situated between Israel and Jordan. It's the largest and most populous of the Palestinian Territories, home to about 3 million Palestinians and 500,000 Israeli settlers. All of the settlements in the West Bank are considered illegal under international law, and the Palestinian Territory itself is considered occupied by the United Nations. One thing that's also important to understand about the West Bank is that it's divided into 3 areas. So in Area A, it's under full control of the Palestinian authorities. In Area B, it's under civil control of the Palestinian authorities, but there are shared security controls with Israel. And then Area C is fully under the Israeli military control.
And it's in Area C that you went to a set of villages called Msafiata, where, as you say, security is run there by the Israeli authorities. What kind of a place is that?
So Msafiata is a collection of around a dozen villages in the South Hebron Hills. Traditionally, it's home to shepherds and people who cultivate the land. The population increased quite considerably after 1948, when Israel was founded and Palestinians were displaced to the West Bank. Geographically, it's a very beautiful place. It's warm. There's very little pollution. At night, you can see the stars. Under different circumstances, it would be a very idyllic place to live. One of the first things I noticed was, the beauty of the rolling hills. You can smell wild herbs on the air. I mean, if I had to summarize, I'd say it's a really peaceful place that doesn't have peace. In reality, it's not a pastoral idyll. It's another front line, really, where farmers and shepherds are facing daily attacks from Israeli settlers and are living under the threat of constant eviction. Actually, the day before I set off to visit there from Tel Aviv with my very talented fixer, Raed Khatib, I heard from Basel, the Oscar director, that one of his neighbours had been shot by a settler who was erecting an iron mast in his olive groves in an attempt to fence off the land. The settler shot 2 bullets into the air and then the third into this man Saeed's leg. He was later taken to hospital in Israel by the army, and due to the delay in him receiving surgery, they had to amputate his leg from the thigh, all while he was handcuffed to a hospital bed. He wasn't actually released until a few days later after having to pay bail of 5,000 shekels, which is equivalent to about £1,000. Regarding that incident, the IDF told me that an operational procedure was carried out, a hit was identified, and the incident is being reviewed by the commanding officers.
Okay. So you meet Hamdan and Basel, these two people behind that Oscar-winning film that you mentioned.
Has it been really busy since the film?
Yeah, since we released the film, to be honest, it's crazy.
Tell us about the film. What exactly is it about?
So the documentary centres around Basel's life as a Palestinian activist living in the West Bank. He spends his time documenting violence and destruction in the area of his home, Msafiata, and we see that in the film, but we also see a wider view of what life is like for people there, in both the daily difficulties of not being able to cultivate their land, of living under eviction orders, but also intense moments where, for example, Basel's cousin was shot. The documentary also shows the growth of a friendship between Basel and an Israeli journalist who worked on the film called Yuval Abraham. Msafiata is actually quite unique in that there are a lot of international volunteers as well as Israelis who come to the villages to help the residents cultivate their land and essentially act as a deterrent or a human shield from settler attacks. And the film really shows the power of solidarity and the importance of coexistence between Israelis and Palestinians.
And is that why they made the film, I guess, to make that point?
Yeah, I think Basel's hope was that the film would incite change, that people would learn about what was happening and would take actions necessary to stop it. He wanted people to see the reality of what life is like for people and, show the importance of that relationship.
Wanting all of that from a film is one thing. Winning an Oscar for it is another. That must have been a really important moment for them.
Absolutely. Hamdan described to me the moment they found out they were nominated for the Oscar. They were obviously very excited, and he described how there was a small table in the room and he jumped over it. And in that moment, they were just so elated.
So crazy moments. All of us together.
Their acceptance speech at the Oscars went viral as well. Basel spoke about what life was like in Msafiata.
Always fearing settlers' violence, home demolitions, and forest spill displacement.
And Yuval, the Israeli journalist, criticised US policy, but really emphasised the importance of coexistence and solidarity between Israeli and Palestinian civilians.
Can't you see that we are intertwined? That my people can be truly safe if Basel's people are truly free and safe. There is another way.
And we'll get into the impact that and the film had in a minute. But getting back to the issue at hand, into what is happening in the West Bank, why are Israeli settlers moving there? Why do they want that land?
Well, some people might be moving due to cheap housing, which is subsidised by the government, but many are motivated to settle there due to ideological reasons. They refer to the West Bank as Judea and Samaria, and they believe that it's divinely promised to them, and that by going to settle there, they are furthering their cause.
And what about Msafiata specifically?
In the 1980s, Israel declared Msafiata a closed military zone to be used for military training. And that's a decision that was upheld in 2022 by the Israeli High Court, which argued that Palestinians hadn't been permanent residents in the area and therefore could be expelled. And it's important to mention there had been a continuous Jewish presence in that area until 1929, when a massacre led to the community's expulsion. And then after Israel captured Hebron in the Six-Day War in 1967, many returned. And the settlement community, which numbered about a few hundred in the late 80s, has now grown to over 500,000, according to Israel's Central Bureau of Statistics.
And what happens to the Palestinian people displaced in that process?
Well, the title of the film says it all, really, that there is no other land. Many people might be forced to move to urban centres in the West Bank or to live amongst the rubble of their homes, but there are very few options for them.
So the majority of this film, Venetia, was shot before the 7th of October. And of course, many people listening will know that that date in 2023 was when this large attack was carried out by Hamas, which killed over 1,100 people, kidnapped 250 or so hostages, 59 of whom remain in captivity, 24 are hoped to still be alive. The worst attack on Jewish people since the Holocaust. We sort of know the story about what happened in Gaza after October the 7th, but in terms of what we're discussing here, the West Bank, what happened there?
Since October 7th, the number of attacks by settlers, demolitions, as well as the expansions of settlements themselves have all increased. Data from the UN shows that the number of attacks by Israeli settlers has actually doubled. Data from two human rights organizations based in Israel, B'Tselem and Peace Now, also show that the number of demolitions has increased, as well as the amount of land declared as Israeli state land for the purpose of building settlements. And there have been military operations across all of the West Bank, specifically recently in Jenin. And one particularly worrying development that was mentioned to me in Msafiata was due to the knock-on effects of soldiers being redeployed to Gaza. So with soldiers who used to work for the IDF in the West Bank protecting settlements, with them now needing to be relocated, the IDF has recruited settlers themselves to the reserves and into settlement defense squads. So this means the line between settler and state violence has really blurred. Previously, disputes would be mediated by the Israeli military or police. If there was an issue, you might be taken to the police station, be asked to give your statements, etc., etc. Now, villagers are saying to me that the very settlers who used to attack them are now coming to attack them in military uniform with military weapons, leaving them no one to call.
What did the IDF say about this?
So the IDF pointed to the fact that since October 7th, there has been a rise in terrorism across the region with over 2,000 attempted terror attacks. They also said that as a general rule, the service of reservists who might have had a report or an allegation made against them would be temporarily suspended until legal proceedings in their case were concluded. And that is specifically in reference to the point made that many of the settlers who have been recruited themselves have a history of criminal violence against Palestinians.
What about the creators of the film? What do they say about what life is like in the West Bank post-October 7th?
When I spoke to Basel in his home in Atawani, he explained to me how the number of settler attacks and demolitions has really increased since October 7th.
A lot of the settlers became soldiers that come...
He also explained how drones would be regularly flown at livestock to distress them.
The sound would make the sheep run and hit each other and fall, and that caused legs broken.
They would even fly drones into ancient caves, which some people live in. These ancient caves have been home to Palestinian shepherds and farmers for centuries, and they're really a last resort for people who might have had their homes above ground demolished. But what's quite concerning is recently, since the beginning of this year, the Israeli military, for the first time in decades, has actually been bulldozing these ancient caves. The IDF did not respond specifically regarding the destruction of the caves. Economically speaking, following October 7th, hundreds of thousands of work permits were revoked. So according to the International Labour Organization, around 180,000 Gazans and 160,000 Palestinians from the West Bank who used to work in Israel no longer have these work permits. Only 8,000 have actually been reinstated under temporary measures. So this huge loss of livelihood, coupled with the fact that they're struggling to cultivate their land, means that there are very little opportunities for people to make money, and people are becoming increasingly impoverished.
But what's the Israeli reason for doing that, if that is the case?
There is evidence to suggest that some Gazans who had work permits in Israel were involved in helping Hamas plan the attacks on October 7th. So that's the security context and the reasoning behind Israel's decision to revoke work permits for Palestinians.
So what are people doing for money then?
Very little. I think those who have managed to keep their jobs are holding on to them, but the majority of people are reliant on aid, what they can cultivate of their land, which is increasingly difficult. The sort of infrastructure that I could see there in terms of sanitation, most of the toilets were donated from foreign governments or the United Nations. These toilets themselves regularly get demolished. Yeah, I think it's really difficult for people to survive unable to earn an income or be able to cultivate their land.
If you're an Israeli citizen, you might be worried about the people who live in places like Msafiata, especially after October 7th. You might worry that they support or enable attacks on Israel? I mean, to what extent do we know that that might be the case or not?
Well, I can tell you what I saw, and the people that I met were living in very simple homes. They were farmers and shepherds, busy thinking about how to make it to the next day. There was no discussion of political revenge, of resistance. I saw no imagery relating to militants. In fact, the council leader of one of the villages, Al-Khair, told me that the people were even afraid to have a Palestinian flag in their homes after being threatened by settlers. Hamas showed the world on October 7th that Israel's fears of terrorism are very much grounded in reality. That is undeniable. Across the board, we need to separate those responsible from those not responsible. For example, if the IDF or specific soldiers in the IDF have found to committed a crime, accountability for that shouldn't fall on Israelis. And accountability for terror attacks by militia in the West Bank shouldn't fall in the lap of all Palestinians in the West Bank. So this is the environment that Hamdan Ballal, the Oscar director, he himself returned to coming back from Hollywood, in which he was attacked by soldiers and settlers.
Venetia, we've been discussing the film No Other Land and its amazing win at the Oscars this year for Best Documentary, but the very complex situation it depicts and which continues. You mentioned that Hamdan Ballal, one of the directors, returned home after that ceremony in Los Angeles, right back to the thick of this complex and arguably worsening situation.
Hamdan told me that upon his return, his neighbour was being harassed by settlers who were vandalising his home.
In the beginning, the settlers attacked my neighbor's house.
And Hamdan, having learnt the importance of documenting these situations, went out to document them and support his neighbour, and was himself attacked by one settler and two soldiers. He ran home to the door of his family house, told his wife and kids to stay inside.
And then start to beat me.
And he says that they beat him for around 20 minutes, denied him the ability to get into an ambulance, and later blindfolded and arrested him and took him into detention, where he says they mocked him continually and, in his view, were trying to take revenge for the Oscar movie.
Why does he think that?
They made various comments directly referencing the movie.
So I have just my name and the Oscar. So I understand from this word, it's like they speak about me. They spoke about the movie. Hold the night.
I see. And he's saying that it was settlers who were also IDF soldiers who were doing this.
He said it was one settler and two soldiers who are settlers themselves and were previously just settlers, who he has known for many years and had issues with in the past. And I mean, as he put it, this was evidence that an Oscar cannot protect you.
And again, the IDF say what to this?
In response to the allegation that Hamdan was attacked by a settler and two soldiers, the IDF said that it was false and entirely unfounded that he was beaten while in custody. They added that Hamdan was provided with medical treatment and that being handcuffed during his detention is in accordance with operational procedures.
And he says that having won an Oscar doesn't protect you from this kind of thing, but it does mean that there's a bit more media attention directed towards it than maybe it might be otherwise.
Absolutely. So that night, when he heard about the incident, co-director Yuval posted on X saying that Hamdan had been attacked and detained. Given the spotlight they were under after the Oscar win, that very quickly went viral, which led to headlines around the world.
An Israeli settler has reportedly beat a Palestinian film director who won this year's Oscar for Best Documentary.
This is the moment Israeli soldiers detained Hamdan Ballal, according to activists.
And he told me that in the last hour of his detention, the behaviour of those who had detained him very much changed. They were asking him if he was okay, if he wanted something to eat. And he believes that's because the media were outside.
And what was the response from, I guess, even Hollywood itself? He's just back from the Oscars. Did that lot have anything to say about this?
The Academy issued a statement condemning, harming or suppressing artists for their work or their viewpoints, but they didn't actually name Hamdan specifically, and this caused quite a furore in social media. Lots of other celebrities signed a letter, including Olivia Colman, Richard Gere, Ava DuVernay, Emma Thompson.
Over 600 Oscar voters have signed an open letter criticizing the leadership of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences for its initial response to the recent assault and arrest of Oscar winner Hamdan Ballal.
And did that achieve anything? He asked witheringly about Hollywood actors signing letters in support of a cause.
The Academy eventually apologised to Hamdan and to all the artists who felt that their original statement didn't give Hamdan the support he deserved by not naming him. There was a lot of coverage, but very little impact back home. I mean, his status didn't protect him from the attack. It won't protect him from future attacks. It didn't protect his neighbours from attacks. In any way, you could argue that it also made him a target.
So your filmmakers, Hamdan and Basel, are they filming again? Is the camera back out?
Yeah, just last week, they were all on site filming what they said is the largest demolition in Msafiata yet, which almost completely eradicated the village of Khalat al-Daba, which is actually where 3 ancient caves were destroyed in February. And then a further 6 ancient caves were destroyed, which were homes to people, along with 25 other homes, leaving the majority of the village homeless. The IDF didn't respond specifically regarding the destruction of caves, but they said that they'd carried out enforcement actions requiring them to dismantle a number of illegal structures built in a closed military zone, and that this was done only after all administrative procedures were completed. The majority of international volunteers also usually stay in a guest house in Basel's village of Atawani. That guest house is now also under demolition order. It's been postponed until the 29th of May at a court hearing, but there's a chance that it could be demolished in the meantime.
The people that you met, do they look at the future of all of this and seem quite pessimistic about it, or is there a bit of hope there?
Hamdan was definitely maintaining some optimism despite being attacked just a few weeks before. He believes in the collaboration. He believes that documenting this can make a difference.
We have to work step by step. We don't give up. We will try to use this as audience, this is voices around the world to stop what's happening here.
Basel also wants to remain optimistic, but when I met him, he was quite disheartened. After the Oscars win in March, Basel had a series of meetings with politicians across Europe, and what left him feeling hopeless was this feeling and this realization that they know about the situation. They know what's going on, but they're not really willing to take action.
Your work is important, keep doing it, but what about?
And they would tell him his work is important and he needs to keep doing it. And he would ask them, what about your work? He said that, all settlements are illegal under international law. They don't want a war. They don't want to kill anyone. They just want this international law to be implemented. If you were like the prime minister, what would you do?
They should do a small thing, which is recognize Palestine as state, to respect the ICJ ruling about the occupation. The whole occupation is illegal and should not be existing.
And what about you? What is your reflection, having now been there and seen a lot of this up close? I'm sure you've followed it and reported on all of this for a long time, but has your recent exposure to all of this surprised you in any way?
Having the opportunity to go to the West Bank and physically see with your own eyes how life is under occupation is obviously incredibly insightful. One village council leader in Khair pointed to the settlement of Carmel in front of him, explained how they have roads, they have internet, they had electricity, then pointed back to their homes that they don't have electricity or any of these basic necessities, and said quite clearly, this is the difference in life in 100 meters. The experience also left me with some hope about how open and willing people are to have solidarity with civilians on the other side of the conflict and work together for a brighter future, which is what you really see in Msafiata. You see a lot of Palestinians and Israelis trying to work together to achieve peace.
Venetia Menzies. You can read all of her work at thetimes.com, including her Sunday Times article about that visit to Msafiata. You can get that if you have a Times digital subscription. That is it from us. Today's producer was Hannah Varrell, the executive producer was Fiona Leach, and sound design and theme composition was by Mal Assetto. I'm Luke Jones. See you soon.